So I'll go over the assignment for Esperanza Rising. And there's two versions of the same thing. One is for face-to-face streaming students, and one is for online non-streaming students. So here's the assignment. Come up with a potential topic, and this part is common to both. Come up with a potential topic, title it something clever, please, and give a 150-word explanation of the topic. Identify 2 or 3 adolescent young adult novels, at least one needs to be from our reading list, in your explanation. And so the only difference is that this group of students needs to put 300 words. That's the only difference. And here is an example of what it might look like. So, and I came up with this last night, and I thought, oh man, I really need to write this article. Feeding and fueling the revolution, or feeding and fueling revolution. So most of the novels we've read this semester in some way address notions of resistance and sometimes revolution. The resistance and revolution take many forms, including open rebellion, civil disobedience, subverting institutions that surround characters, and so on. All of the novels we've read this semester also deal in some way with food and sustenance. Resistance, revolution, and food, however, intersect in very specific ways in 2 novels. One Crazy Summer, and this is so easy to see, The Evolution of Evelyn Serrano, but you wouldn't see it unless you read them probably together, like we've done. Both of these novels, which are based on actual events regarding the Black Panthers, and that would be One Crazy Summer and The Young Lords, Evolution of Evelyn Serrano, convey the importance of providing sustenance for individuals actively engaged in the movement and for those who support the movement in less obvious ways. Both novels underscore the roles of feeding and fueling the revolution. Those roles include creating community, garnering support, and simply ensuring survival of a group. That's it. Now, online students will need, or online non-streaming students will need to, do a little bit more, so that wasn't quite right. Since online non-streaming students won't be able to answer questions, try to anticipate the questions that you might encounter, and that's included in your 300 words. You don't have to answer those questions, but anticipate them, think about, and maybe we can contemplate the answers to those questions. So I'm thinking Shay probably says motherhood, that'll be me. Am I correct? Yeah, but there are a lot of common things and topics that arise in the novels that we've read. Mothering is certainly one. Invisibility. So, but come up with that clever title, because that's the most fun part for me, is to reading your titles. Hi, Greg. I think I got a lot of you enrolled in $5.99 next semester, yeah? And Greg has signed up for it. And Megan has signed up for it. And
Jennifer Ellison, maybe?
Jennifer Ellison has signed up for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I actually am far over enrolled in the class. It's supposed to have 18 seats, and I'm at 24.
Ooh, it's a long way yet to the stars. Oh, can more still sign up?
Since it's a requirement for our master's program, I just can't, in good conscience, not let them sign up.
Yeah. So it's early. 24 and it's early.
Yeah, because we're still admitting graduate students to the program, and once they get into the program, then they need to take the $5.99 as soon as possible. So, yep, since we only offer it every spring, that kind of if somebody, you can complete the master's in 2 years, pretty, with routinely, we have students routinely do that. So that's that's the deal. I'm not going to delay anybody's graduation by a semester for $5.99. Not when they can take it now. Now, if they haven't put any thought into it, maybe they're not going to get into the course. Good cause gets them into the course. So we need to talk about presentations, and those begin the week after next with Thanksgiving in between there. Can you believe it? Oh my gosh. What happens if the rest of our lives go this way? They're going to be over before I retire.
So it's going to go presentations, Thanksgiving presentations?
Oh, didn't I? Oh, there it is. I thought I put, oh, well, it's right here. Yes. So here it is, presentations on the 20th. Oh, hold it, the 13th.
Oh.
No, they don't. Oh, yeah.
Finish Esperanza?
Esperanza's next week. Presentations
Oh,
on the 13th. Hold it.
Next week is the 13th.
Just push everything back by 1 week.
So we have presentations on the 20th and the 4th.
Did you mean the 13th week? Because it was week 13, I think.
Oh, that might be it.
Still 2 weeks.
I thought maybe she wanted us to start
After Esperanza.
yeah.
It is after Esperanza.
Well, but I thought you meant on that same day. I didn't foresee us finishing that discussion because we don't usually. But I thought maybe you were being optimistic.
So that is.
Or maybe like Shay would need to present early with the baby. So that's how we were going to start on the 13th.
So it's the 20th.
And the 4th.
And then we're done.
And I can guarantee that we won't have class on Wednesday. I think they usually cancel class
At noon.
at noon on Wednesdays, so I'm not going to have class on Wednesday. That would be silly. Hi, Emily.
Hi. I couldn't figure out the audio, and then I
Do
figured
what?
I couldn't figure out the
okay.
audio. Yeah.
But now you've got it. Okay. So Thanksgiving, so presentations on the 20th, Thanksgiving week, December 4th.
That's right.
Is that right? Is the 4th our last class?
Yes.
Okay. We probably aren't going to have enough. Well, we'll have enough time with the students who actually just don't present physically, because students are online and streaming. You can either present like you would normally present, you'd have some kind of a visual, but you can talk through it with us. If you're online and streaming, then you have to do a voiceover. Or streaming students can also opt out and just record the whole thing ahead of time, and you won't talk us through it. You can do the voiceover as well. I don't know how to do that. I know it takes quite a bit of time to put something like that together, to narrate it, to get the timing down. The presentation is relatively basic. For face-to-face students, you'll tell us about your edited collection, how it functions, its significance and relevance for adolescent and or young adult literature. You should offer some kind of visual component, PowerPoint series of posters, something like that, but it's meant to guide you. In other words, don't simply read from it like I'm doing right now. Streaming students have an option of either presenting as if you're in class or providing a very inclusive presentation with some kind of voiceover. Upload or provide a link for it. Whatever you do, make sure the voiceover link presentation works, or I won't read it and read it to the class. If you do voiceover presentation, it should be about 5 to 8 minutes long, because I know it takes so much time to put these together. In-class and streaming presentations, if you're giving it in present, should be 8 to 10 minutes long, because that's much easier to do than doing all that voiceover stuff and planning everything out. So what are your questions so far? So you don't have to have your edited collection done before you turn it in. So I don't have the instructions for the edited collection. I do someplace, don't I?
It's the syllabus.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a pretty thorough. Yeah, and we've talked about it every class since then, I think. So let's see. All right, compile and edit.
Did you say that that was supposed to say 300 words instead of 3,000?
How much is 3,000? It's
About
15
10 or 12 pages.
yeah, it's only 10 or 12 pages. Only. Yeah, I know. That's short. That's short for a grad class. Right? Right?
For $5.99, weren't we turning in like 25 pages?
We turned in a lot, yeah. Yeah. I know, we're just all about worn out by that time. 3,000.
Is it like 250 per page? She's got 15.
It's about, usually about 300.
Oh, okay.
So it's right around 10 pages. But there is a lot more because of the annotations, but
Right.
those should be relatively easy.
They're 300 each, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And see, you can lift from your annotations.
Right.
What to some, well, no, not
Because if you do, then it becomes more of a bibliographic essay.
yeah, and that's not what we want. So the introduction is setting the rest of the book up.
Putting them in conversation with one
Yeah.
another.
And just giving necessary history. So you've actually got two examples because I put in there Little Red Readings, I believe. I added that so you could look at that to see what the introduction looked like to that. And Hubler goes in to explain what all of the variations are, the rationale for why we should use, she doesn't use Marxism, but that's what it is. And she explains why she uses historical materialism rather than Marxism because of the connotations and the associations with Marxism and the bad name it gets. Because it gets attached to communism. So what questions do you have so far? Have you started work on your collection? Yay.
On the annotated bid.
Yay.
I'm still reading and annotating.
Yeah, and you'll pick up lots of information as you go through and yeah.
Use that
Dr.
Thanksgiving
Stewart.
break though.
Yeah, ditto.
Yes?
I did have one question. I have a book that I'm looking at. And is it okay if I use 2 chapters from the same book as 2 separate sources?
What's your topic?
Like queer studies.
And what's the book itself?
Let me pull it. It was,
Yeah, you can. Yeah, that'll be fine.
okay.
So does anybody, before we get started on other matters, want to go over anything that's happened? It's been a long time since we've met, 2 weeks. I did not anticipate not having class on Wednesday. I needed it. I needed it for a variety of reasons, including processing everything that happened. As I've talked to more and more students, that party was almost all of the attendees were A&M-Commerce students. John Humphreys, the provost, sent out an email saying it was 1 out of 10. It wasn't. It was nearly everybody. And I had lots of students in my classes that were there, one of which got a front row seat to it. Just one of the deaths.
I think the 1 in 10 was like, not 1 in 10 of people there, but 1 in 10 of our undergrads was there.
Okay, that makes a difference. Yeah.
Which is still a lot.
It's, oh, yeah. So if there were, say they said 750 students there. That the largest percentage were our student, or 750 people were at the party. The largest percentage of that, by far, came from commerce. And my students are really, really angry at the way the university handled it with the emails that saying, not my fault, not our fault, not a campus event,
Not us.
not us,
Yeah.
we didn't do that.
It wasn't sanctioned. I'm like, that doesn't matter.
You know what, university, dear university, please be aware of what's going on. If know from this point on that there are going to be unsanctioned parties, homecoming parties. Know from this point on that there are going to be unsanctioned and large Halloween parties, and never ever forget that when it's Halloween and homecoming at the same time, basically.
We're serious.
Yeah. So this is something that, with hindsight, I can say, why didn't you anticipate this? And, you know, it's not my job to anticipate it, but it is their job to anticipate it, especially in the environment that we live in. So yeah, it took me some time. Well, yeah, one of my students said she's never going to get over what she saw, because she saw one of them who was shot in the face. So that's pretty bad, pretty rough. And we're apparently going to be losing a lot of students over all of this, because their parents are pulling them out, don't want them to come back, don't feel safe.
What was the university's reasoning for not canceling classes on Monday? Like,
You got me.
because I felt like that was highly insensitive.
It was. I canceled my classes.
Right.
And I sent a really angry email explaining that to, I wasn't angry at the students, but they knew how angry I was that classes were being held on Monday. And then I went ahead and sent that to Rudin as well, so he knew what I was communicating with my students, that, what do you mean by holding class on Monday? Crazies. Yeah, that was really insensitive.
I told people at my work about it. They couldn't believe that they even told us in an email that we were going to be at class on Monday. It just, what do you mean you were going to be, that they told you to go to, yes, they told students to go to class on Monday. October 30th, yes, they said.
Yeah, and what I would like now is an accounting of what happened, about the injuries. I don't care, I don't need names, but I need to know the facts about it. And man, that has been a muddled mess from the beginning, including arresting the wrong guy.
Right?
And keeping him in jail for how many days?
9, I think.
9? Yeah. When I saw who they arrested, I thought, this looks expedient to me. And it was. And so whoever it was is still out there. Yeah, really. Yeah.
What brought it to a halt? Do you know?
Mass chaos.
Well, and there were cops on the scene already.
Yeah, they were already there on parking violations, but the cops didn't seem to be quite, well, you know, it's Hunt County Sheriff's Office. Not accustomed to dealing with something on this scale.
Maybe because I listen to a lot of crime podcasts or something, but I'm like,
I kind
I
of
just don't understand why it wasn't handled differently.
think of not even Mayberry and Bumbling, you know, Barney Fife, how Barney Fife would handle it.
I was afraid that they weren't going to cancel that 4 o'clock gathering.
Yeah, and I was going to attend. I was going to attend that. I didn't want to, but I was going to.
Like I was scared for the people who were planning to attend.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, if you don't have the person who did it and you don't know why it happened, you can speculate all you want, but you still don't know.
Yeah. And then there were
Shots fired.
Thank you.
Yeah, that one in Dallas.
In Dallas and on campus around a fraternity.
Oh,
What?
yeah.
I didn't know about
I
that
didn't hear
one.
about that.
Was that Monday night?
Oh, I thought that they
Mhm.
sent out an email saying that there was no shooting.
There was.
Was.
Yeah.
That vigil.
But you know, it wasn't, there were shots fired at the vigil. Nobody was hurt. And there were shots fired around, it might have not been, quote, on campus, but it was near a fraternity. And just in, in the timing of that, but didn't have anything to do with anything, still the timing of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So my classes are down for sure. And part of it's students who have been affected by it, and some who are just kind of pushed over the line with it. And I'm sure there's some folks who just think, what's the point right now, and don't show up.
Very curious to see how the university handles all that.
Me too.
Continues to. I think, I'm not typically an optimistic person, but I would like to think somebody's going to get it together. Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've been disappointed in some things up to this point. I'm not big on confidence, but I will be pleasantly surprised if something, if they do get it together. That's an academic housing policy. No. And then I was reading further, does not tolerate what? Housing. I do that a lot. I misread a lot of things. All right, questions then about where we go from here? Can you believe it? One more book? 3 weeks, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm so far behind.
You're far behind, but you're here now.
I am for this minute. All right, so as I said, I did not make a presentation. I just simply ran out of time, but everything is on the discussion board and available to everybody. So we'll start with people who are here and can talk about what they found. And remember that one of the deals was you're supposed to go through other posts in the past to come to some of your findings.
Yeah, I read mine right before class, so I remember what I wrote.
Yeah. Jennifer, fighting the good fight quietly. I like that.
So something that Jill said, so first going back to the old discussion boards, I noticed that we talked about resistance and focused on female gender performance a lot. And Jill said something during one of our meetings that really stood out to me, talking about Big Mom and how her generation's resistance was through aesthetics. So it seemed like she wasn't doing anything, but that was her generation's way of fighting back. So I went back through the text that we had read, looking for that type of quiet resistance. And in the book we just read, Mommy, she exhibits the same kind of resistance as Big Mom, trying to keep a nice house. And to Evelyn, it annoys her. She doesn't see it as resistance, but it's her way of resisting.
Well, and she's talking about it being her mom being a slave, and what this form of resistance is trying to do is to try to release people from slavery, and yet a lot of the culture has assimilated, has internalized certain messages. For instance, the hair and what it should look like, and what's considered beauty, and how the mother is supposed to act. So then you speak of aesthetics. Then there's the aesthetics of the poetry mentioned in, although it's not quiet poetry, not by any means, that gets read at the events that they attend.
And I thought Junella, Junior Brown's mom, showed the same kind of resistance. It was detrimental, but still, I think she was resisting in her own way because she obsessed over image to the point that she kind of neglected reality. But I think she was fighting back through image too. And I included a quote. I really liked what Mommy said. She said, "Why do you revolutionaries always think there is only one way to revolt?"
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And connected to what Jill had said that one day.
Yeah, and then what I said in that mini proposal that I wrote that about there's civil disobedience, there's resistance in open resistance, and feeding the revolution and resistance is resistance. Okay. Shay, do you think we can hear you now? Nope, she's gone. Still. Sorry. Alex. Look at that post.
Is that novel?
It wasn't a word count. You're fine.
So I was noticing the differences between the different generations taking action or taking action by not taking action. Specifically, some of the characters, they want to, I just lost all my words. In Evelyn, you have Evelyn and her abuela, who are both very much like, I don't need permission, I see a problem, I'm gonna go after it. And mommy was this book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mommy was like, no, there's a way we do things, you're gonna disrupt the order, but they're like, the order needs to change. And in some of the other books like Feed and Fade, like a lot of the adult characters are taking action by not taking action. It's like the bystander effect. I don't have to do something about this problem because somebody else will.
Mm-hmm.
But if everybody's saying that, then nothing's going to change.
Yeah, that's so that what is that saying? If you do nothing, then you're perpetuating.
Bad things happen when good people do nothing.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Pretty much so. Yeah, and that's what's happening there, and a lot of it. So Titus in Feed just kind of hangs back and watches it all go down and runs from the problem. In fact. There was something else I was just going to say to that too. Oh, did anybody, I forgot to ask an important question, but I'm going to ask this question first. Did anybody get afraid that Abuela was going to be killed at the end?
Yes.
I did. I thought, oh gosh, here it comes. She's staying at the, she's staying there and she's going to get killed. Nobody else felt that? Well,
I did.
Alex did.
I did.
Megan did.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay. I guess, are we
absolutely
pessimists?
petrified. I guess we might be, but I knew somebody was going to die. I just knew it. I felt it in my soul that somebody was about to die.
Well, and it's set up for that. If you know anything about is it Ponce? Or is it Ponce? I think it's Ponce.
Okay.
Massacre, that 19 people were killed in that occurrence, and it was a matter of a group, and then their police force went in and openly shot and killed 19 people and injured 200 in the process. It was awful. Simply awful. And that's that whole thing about Abuela and talking about her husband participating in that and the shame that accompanied it. Because I did some research on it. I didn't know anything about this. I don't know how I didn't know anything about it, this whole thing, and Puerto Rican kind of history. And it's particularly relevant when we think about how Puerto Rico has been treated recently, and the mistakes that have been so offensive and careless coming out of the hurricane and all of that, and Hi, Shay. You went a different route this time, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm trying my phone just because my hotspot's been kind of wonky lately.
Okay, very good. So the question I forgot to ask is, what'd you think of the book? Yeah.
I liked it.
It was a very gripping read. It was, once you got into it, you just didn't want to put it down.
Yeah, I was looking at you because I wasn't sure what you were going to, it looked like you were going to say, not so much.
I liked it. It's just the only thing I know why she did it.
Yep.
I know why so when she uses Spanish in her book,
I know.
after she
I
uses
hate
her
that.
Spanish, she tells you exactly what it meant. And I know why she did it, and so everyone that doesn't know what it means understands what she's trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
But
It wasn't 100% of the time,
yeah,
but it was 98%
Yeah.
of the time.
so it just really kind of takes away from the readers that are Spanish speakers, or I don't know. It really kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, I get it, and especially since the Spanish was actually in quotation marks because, but when Mommy says something, she's not going to say it Spanish and English, because when it's in English, it's also in quotation marks as if it's being spoken. Here, let me translate for my daughter who apparently doesn't know Spanish.
Yeah.
You know?
So it really took away from, like, if I'm gonna say chocolate, I'm not gonna say chocolate chocolate. It doesn't make sense.
Giving yourself subtitles.
Yeah. So I don't know. I know why she did it. It's just.
I also thought it was a bit heavy-handed. Now, I have to keep in mind the audience, but your audience will only reach to the levels you ask it to. That's why I always push students to do more than they think they can do. It's because they will achieve those levels to some degree. But if I set the bar low, that's what I'm going to get. If I set it high, they might not reach that high bar, but they're going to work toward it. And I mean, I think that's common in just about any teaching. Yeah, so you set those expectations up. Okay, Shay, let's go back to you and mothers. Oh, by the way, Shay, when you're doing it on your phone like this, does this cost you data?
Yeah, but it costs me data even if I use my hotspot, so it's
Okay.
ridiculous.
I gotcha.
Okay, so can you guys hear me? Yes.
Beautifully.
Okay. One thing that I noticed in going back and rereading a lot of the PowerPoints and stuff, even though we talked a lot about mothering, given some of the mothers that we've read about this semester, one thing that I noticed a lack of was a discussion more or less about like how relationships are formed between the mother and the child. Because I noticed it a lot in this book, the Evelyn Serrano book, because you really saw it focused a lot on the mother-daughter relationship, both between Abuela
2 levels, yeah. Mm-hmm.
and Mammy, and then Mammy and Evelyn. And so it resonated with me. And so I was like, huh. And so I went back and really kind of thought about how mothers' relationships were depicted with the child, and noticed that there was a difference a lot of the time if the child was female and if the child was male. The especially with Evelyn Serrano, and I believe it was, which one did I mention? I think it was Pravana's Journey. Even though you don't see the mom in Pravana's Journey, the relationship that we are told about is very positive and very supportive. And even Evelyn's mom, even though she doesn't agree initially with Evelyn's views, like when she starts going to the church occupation, she still lets her go. She goes with her, to kind of make sure she stays safe, but she doesn't like forcefully keep her at home. So it's still kind of that supportive relationship. And whereas with a lot of the relationships between mother and son, it doesn't seem as supportive as much as either being super dysfunctional, like between Junella and Junior and Planet of Junior Brown, or essentially just kind of not present at all, like between Titus and his mom and Feed. Like we see
parents are just adults in general are just worthless.
Right. And so while we see Titus's mom, she's essentially not parenting in any way, shape, or form. I mean, especially with the way she chases around the younger brother, And so you don't see that real supportive and like a growing type of relationship between mothers and the sons so much as you see it between the mothers and the daughters. Aside from One Crazy Summer and Cecile and Feed, with Violet's mom just not being there. So those are the only two books that really I felt was an exception as far as the daughters and mothers go. And so that really just kind of, it was something that really kind of caught my attention. And I mean, it's probably because I've got mothering on the mind. So, and I just happened because, in going through, and we've discussed mothering and parenting all through the semester. That's something that we hadn't really talked about. And so that's kind of where I kind of came from this last week.
That's called an identity theme. And I'm not much for the word identity. And another semester I'll explain that. But in these terms, it's accurate. So that means that we kind of see the world through a particular lens. I always see the world through a feminist, Marxist, materialist lens, always. Everything I read, television I watch, the news that I watch, I see what's reported, who's represented and how they're represented, and I'm always aware of that. So that's how I see, that's what colors and shapes my world. You, Shay, see everything as to how mothering is represented, or
right.
What kinds of roles.
And I'm mothering adolescents at this point too, so I find a lot of connections between mothering my own kids and the books that we're reading.
Great. Can some of you others identify your identity theme as to how you see the world? Kind of.
I think I see it from like the invisible point of view. In some of my responses, I've mentioned that I was the victim of bullying and things like that. And I think that I just kind of separated myself from everybody else. So it was self-inflicted invisibility, but I see it and I kind of see them find their quirks in the novels that we've read and kind of grow in that uniqueness of themselves and also want to fit in and want to do everything else that everybody else is doing. So I kind of see it there.
Yeah, and there are people who see it through a psychoanalytical lens, as in terms of Freud or Lacan or Kristeva or somebody like that. So, and I do tend to see things through a Freudian, Lacanian. There's that component, because when I see when I see displacement or projection occurring, I know that's about Freud. So that I've told other people that I project. I told our administrative assistant that the other day that I thought she would like it if our grad students took over the holiday gathering. And I said, I did that because I hate doing that kind of thing. And I was projecting my attitude on you, and had to apologize for doing that, because she did want to be part of it and is going to be part of it. But I was projecting, and I know exactly what was happening there. And, you know, the dreams that Violet has, I could analyze those through Freudian dream interpretation, because Freud was pretty good at that, although he said that we need a psychoanalysis to understand our dreams. You don't. I can analyze most dreams, not knowing all of Freud. So I was great, you know, business builder. See me and I'll talk to you about your dreams and what they mean. Oh, I can tell you exactly what they mean, and you don't have to pay me. So yeah, that's just. Anybody else have a particular bent on the way they look at the world?
Since being in the grad program, I probably look at things through the Marxist lens.
Completely.
Because of ideology and what shapes society and how do we shape it. And I've always been something of a control freak anyway. And so now realizing there's control going on that I wasn't even conscious of before. And
oh, like, dang.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I maybe I knew it was there, but didn't know it was there. I mean, because it all makes sense. And whenever it all started making sense, I was like,
oh, I get it.
Oh, and it just, now I see it everywhere. Like, you know why that is, don't you? You know why that happens, don't you? Like, there are things happening here. We don't call it brainwashing. It's kind of what it is, though. And so, you know, like, I've always enjoyed a good conspiracy theory. I don't consider myself, like, a conspiratist or anything like that. But, like, I definitely go that bent.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, look at who's got the control. How do they have the control? How do they get the control? How do they keep it?
Yeah, and I certainly see things through race because I'm so conscious of it, and especially white privilege. So, I mean, I've got all of these that just don't leave me alone, basically. My head's going to explode.
Topic is going to be for Esperanza Rising, then, isn't it?
What?
I guess that answers my question is what my topic's probably going to be for next week.
I wonder. Yeah, knowing about that identity. Now, as it happens, you know, because I've had so much schools, that's so much reading, and have taught for so long, it's just, I can't shake it. I can't let it go. And so I just kind of learn to embrace it and laugh as much as I can. So Emily, where'd you go? There you are.
Yeah, I did.
I got your post up.
Yeah, I kind of noticed when I was looking back on previous discussions and what we've been talking about is a lot of what we discussed ties back to identity. And I kind of made this connection. I noticed that a lot of the identity aspects that we've been noticing connect back to just survival and just surviving the community that these characters are in, and the marginalization and the oppression that they face. And so I noticed that specifically in like Parvana's journey, where she literally has to change her identity to survive. And then we see a different kind of search for identity in Dear Martin when Justice is looking for his identity through Martin Luther King and the letters that he's writing to him. And then I noticed it really a lot in Evelyn Serrano, because she literally wants to change her name, how she identifies herself, so that she's less Puerto Rican. And I don't know, I think like that was her way of trying to find her identity, but also trying to survive in a community in a world where being Puerto Rican is frowned upon. And so she's kind of navigating these different identities to figure out where she fits and how she can survive this kind of like push to be white or push to be what is considered normal. And I just kind of think that connected all the texts for me, at least.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's one of the things that holds adolescent. I mean, that's common in adolescent and young adult literature, especially that right in between those two. It's about them figuring out who they are and what they are, and so to give readers a model of how to go about that or how not to go about it, both ways. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. That's one of the defining characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
All of them are about that. Everything's about that. But I'm trying to think. Everything that I can think of deals with that in young adult and adolescent literature. I'm thinking of adult novels, and certainly that occurs on occasion as well, but it's not the defining characteristic at all, because I'm thinking of the post-apocalyptic novels that I read and that bears the kind of the souls of humans and what drives them. So with post-apocalyptic novels, you often see a really bad people surface, and ones that are going to be cruel and want power and will take any measure to get it and maintain it. And then you have individuals who fight against that and seek to survive, but to create community at the same time. That seems to be what I see as the defining characteristic, the defining, some of the differences. So how one comes to a sense of self is different in adolescent young adult literature as compared to adult literature, if you can figure out the difference. I'm mothering. I like that. Is that the reverse of mothering? No. Okay, Jeannie, so tell us about this.
Well, I looked at it, Janice, I think, said, she was looking at parenting, and she saw the sunny side, which just, I never would have, of, like, for example, Cecile, of unmothering. And so, and I agree with what she had to say. She said that she had to, they had to Delphine, and they had to be independent, and so she saw some good things. And another thing about the mothering was talking about. I also looked at it always as unmothering. I mean, that's what I learned in picture books. No mothers, or they're, and I just wasn't creative. And who was it? Jill. Jill mentioned adults, and so I started thinking about the novels we've read. And already I had read my article a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, the week before this, about that fathers are kind of around for comedic relief anyway. And she said something about lack of parenting, or lack of that the adults acted badly instead of just the mothers.
Certainly in Feed.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, and in several. And in fact, even in Evelyn, or Serrana, even though Poppy did gain some status in that he got a name change, remember, he kind of got promoted by her, but he really wasn't in it. It really wasn't.
He's befuddled and bewildered by, what are these women doing?
Yes, right.
I want my wife back.
All this in and out. Yeah, and he was just kind of there at home once in a while. And so then I started thinking about like TV and all, and it's true, the fathers are just the bumbling idiots, of course, and the movies too.
Didn't she even compare him yelling at mommy like Ricky yelling at Lucy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so those are the things that came out to me because, and another thing that I noticed too was with this boy, of the fathers not there, it seemed like, obvious, but I didn't really put this thought together. There was someone an organization who stepped in, like the Young Lords or the Black Panthers, so they just, and the children or the adolescents were hungry for that. And so.
There's a term that's used. It's a legal term. It's called parentis. Parentis in locos, I think it's called, and it means standing in for the parent. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. So Roberta Seelinger Trites came up with a term, parentis in logos, which means parents in words, through word, parenting through words. So that, for instance, have we read any epistolary novels this semester? Journal novels, letter writing novels, or anything like that?
I mean, unless you count the Dear Martin.
It is, okay, so that, yeah, Dear Martin, yeah. And although Justice has, pretty strong parents and stand there for him, but there's a really creepy novel called Daddy Longlegs, and it's older. And it's creepy, I think. In fact, Roberta introduced, I took one of her classes, or took several of her classes, and we read that in her class, and I was just kind of appalled because it's about an orphan girl who stays at an orphanage, and there's a rich benefactor or a rich man who wants to be her kind of a secret benefactor. And so they start writing letters to each other. Yeah, really. So icky. And they end up married, I think. I know, it's really kind of creepy. And it's kind of also like a Dr. Dolittle, or no, not Dr. Dolittle, The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain.
Right, My Fair Lady.
My Fair Lady. What is that? Yeah, what is that? It is a Doolittle. I think his name is Doolittle. And transforming the Cockney girl into a proper British girl. And that's what if I'm not mistaken, that's what attempts to occur in Daddy Longlegs. And but she calls it, and so those letters that the female, or that Daddy Longlegs writes to the female protagonist, serves as a parent in the absence of parenting. Same thing with Are You There, God, It's Me by Judy Blume. Same thing with all kinds of those novels where they're, epistolary, they're writing and creating kind of this parent to listen to. So that's called parentis in logos, parent in words. And that's kind of what's happening with that part. Yeah, and I pointed out, men aren't always, of course, dads aren't always, of course, useless. But there's a darn good in the movies. I mean, sorry, in movies and books and stuff. Yeah, my dad was a great dad. Sorry, I forgot that really major portion. Oh, that would be Freud. Sorry. See what I mean? Freud's everywhere.
Dads are completely useless
in texts. But if you watch commercials and this has been noted by others, but I saw it early on about how stupid fathers are. How they're depicted as absolutely incompetent as a parent. So they're feeding their kids things that they shouldn't be feeding them, or they're letting their kids do things that they shouldn't be doing, or they're just incompetent and can't do anything. It can't cook. I'll just throw a pizza in the oven, and that's what we're going to have for the rest of our lives. You know? But then now we get these dads that like the
Laundry soap commercials.
which one?
Laundry soap.
Yes, which one is that?
Tide.
Is it Tide, where the princess and cowboy?
Cowgirl. Yeah.
Where he can wash this one while she's doing,
Yeah, yeah. Boom. So now, you know, we have that changed into a highly competent father. And the mother is apparently working. She's the breadwinner. And with the fathers, it's kind of like they're babysitting and don't even know how to do that. Would be fired in an instant as a babysitter. So, and I'm thinking about Leave It to Beaver.
Father's knows best. Those were too perfect. And then the pendulum has to swing.
Mhm. What's the worst father I've seen on television?
Married with children.
Okay, yeah, probably.
Peg is pretty problematic.
What?
Peg is.
I said they're all awful.
Yeah.
Can't really.
Who?
The wife. Peg.
Yeah, the whole
Oh,
family.
yeah.
The whole family. Yeah, can't really.
Yeah, they're completely dysfunctional. Everybody.
I think so.
Dysfunction are us.
Everybody loves Raymond. Home Improvement, and I think that's it. And in the movies, it's also that way.
Yeah. We've got some pretty awesome parents in some of our novels, but not always. Did you?
Yeah, I did it twice because I didn't. One, it was an attachment kind. You had to open it up, so I did it again.
Oh, okay.
Just put it.
Jolene.
yes, ma'am.
Talk about adulting. And about how the adults don't, and so the children must. And so, so I start off by talking about the planet of Junior Brown, and we had a fairly intense conversation about that in class, and we got through most of the slides, but I still incorporated, you know, what Jennifer said about Junella performing motherhood, and then what Katie said about the overperformance leading possibly to her sickness. And I was talking about how, you know, whenever Junior gets out from under all of that, that he's not only saved from the crazed mother, but like his mind comes back. And so it kind of paints Buddy as his child savior.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk a little bit about the child savior then also in Pravana's journey, because she saves, you know, she saves the baby, she saves the crippled boy, she picks up the diseased girl, she saves, well, kind of, for a while, the grandma who is just like a breathing massive meat, like it's pretty much it. So I talked about the video that we watched about Greta Thunberg and how, you know, she's saying we're doing it because no one else will, and that's exactly where Pravana was. Like, if not Pravana, then who?
Yeah, she kind of personifies that, very much so.
And so we have a couple different people who are serving as child saviors, but I felt like Pravana personified that the most. But she also had her own form of activism, which led straight into the Rock and the River for me, and talking about how like Jill and Jeremy both point out the similarities between Pravana providing for her tribe, as it were, and the Black Panther Party providing for everyone and picking up things that society, or even, you know, it could be argued churches should be doing and are not. And so they are taking care of society's needs. They're not relying on anybody else to do it anymore. And so, and part of taking care of the needs is carrying those guns. And something that I don't know if this was a Jolene original or if I read it from somewhere. I didn't attribute it to anybody, so maybe it's me. But I found it really interesting that it says, however, some of the key adults in the Rock and the River were police officers who mishandled justice and their guns on a regular basis Yet we see Sam, a 14-year-old child, wield a gun on more than one occasion with more discernment and responsibility than those who have been trained to use them.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought
That's a Jolynn.
That was Jolynn? Okay. I thought it was. I wrote it down and I was like, I hope that was me. But after reading all of it, I was like, So Sam is that middle ground. And then I think from there I moved into Evelyn Serrano. So let me pull this really quick. And so with Evelyn Serrano, I talk about that middle ground that Sam was. Like, he was like, I'm going to be both a Black Panther and I'm going to stay with my family. And so Evelyn is the middle ground between her enslaved mother and her ridiculously active grandmother. And so like she is in the same place that Sam is in, as far as being both the rock and the river, because like she wants her mom to be not enslaved, but at the same time I love the epiphany she has that she is part of the problem of enslaving her mom, because she won't do it. Her mom has to do it, and that whenever Evelyn realizes that is a turning point, I feel like, for her toward the end of the novel. And so, and I commented on the weak fathers too, or just the weak men in general. Like her biological father is out of the picture. Her stepfather is oblivious. Like the only men who are in control are the young lords who are motivating the change. But I felt like Stephanie had one of the best things that I had read. In her One Crazy Summer post, she said that this group of unhealthy, immature, dysfunctional adults paved the way for these children of resistance.
Children of resistance.
Children of resistance. Mm-hmm. I was like, ooh. And so that was from Stephanie for sure. And so it's only through these trials and tribulations that these strong protagonists are formed. Because here's the deal. If the parents were doing it,
there'd be no
kids
point.
Wouldn't have to, and they would become the parents that they currently have.
So what do you think? This kind of novel is relatively new it started in the 1960s. Don't be surprised there that these young adolescent novels that depict really parents who just suck, basically. That wasn't the norm necessarily for literature that came before. The 60s is a time of revolution, and it was reflected in different ways in the novels that came as a result of that. But so, for instance, if you think about Little House on the Prairie, now that's more children's lit than it is adolescent, but it's kind of in adolescent too. So the parents are both there, highly competent, really good, really make sure they take care of their kids, although they do rip them away, stick them in the middle of nowhere. Oh, my parents did that, basically. They picked me up and moved me whenever they wanted to, and that was a lot of times. So maybe that's responsible or irresponsible to have that westward movement mentality that the Ingalls family had. But generally, parents are just downright wholesome in those books. Well, yeah, and that's a film version. So what else am I thinking of? Okay, Wrinkle in Time. Dad's gone, but he's not gone because of him being inadequate or negligent. He's a scientist who got caught up in what's it called?
It's not the Tesseract.
Yeah, it's the Tesseract. Yeah, the Tesseract, being engaging in that wrinkle in time, crossing over, and gets caught up with it. And Mother is highly competent. She's a scientist, she's a mother, she's everything. She can do it all. What else? Okay, so Daddy Longlegs, I dismissed that out and out. But that's a orphan child.
What about the Waltons go to Birmingham?
Watson's go to Birmingham.
Yeah, Watson's go to Birmingham. Really good parents. Although one has to question how wise it is to take your kids to Birmingham.
Right. Right.
But you know, that's the function of the story. It's not to highlight parents, but it's to highlight that event. At the same time, and you know, we see the mother is incredibly naive, looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, so to speak. And Dad's there, but it's mom who's kind of the authoritarian, and Dad becomes the uber authoritarian when necessary. Although mother's pretty uber too, like when she takes Byron and decides she's going to burn him
With the series.
with a match.
Or with a match, yeah, with a match.
Yeah, I can't remember how it was, but yeah, matches, because Joetta's trying to blow them out.
So.
Yeah.
Joetta's trying to blow them out. But at the same time, he kind of deserved it. He could have burned the house down. So maybe the difference is that it's that kind of tween novel between adolescence and young adult that we see this kind of transition. I'm trying to think. Harriet the Spy. Well, okay, C.S. Lewis, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Aslan has to become kind of the parent figure as the Beaver family. Leave it to beavers.
What about To Kill a Mockingbird?
Well, see, that's kind of that's more of an adult novel.
Okay, I was just thinking because you have Atticus, but since it's told from Scout's perspective,
Scout's point of view.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's more of an adult novel. It was written for adults. I don't think she ever had a young audience in mind. She had an audience in mind that she wanted to make them more aware of injustice. And you can do that so beautifully. Authors can really take advantage, exploit the naive characters who speak the truth, and that those naive, innocent characters who can speak the truth and make a point, essentially. So, I mean, that's what Scout's doing. She's speaking to the unfairness, and Atticus does too, eventually, and in court. But it's up to what's the little girl's name again? Scout. It's up to Scout to say the words consistently throughout. And I think of Stephen King, and you know, he has a lot of protagonists, and those young protagonists, child protagonists, and those young protagonists are the ones who fight evil, because it's pitted against this youth and innocence and naivete are pitted against evil, and generally this innocence wins, even if there's a loss of innocence that an attainment of knowledge that occurs in the process. So I'm listening right now to, I read The Shining years and years ago, and I watched it, of course, when it came out, and that was, there you have kind of the epitome of the Stephen King young protagonist with Danny. And I'm now listening to Dr. Sleep again, and it's the same thing. Danny is the older character now, and we have a new young character who has the insight that and the strength. And Mary Poppins it's the kids who can hear the birds talk and know what they say. So once again, that innocence. Oh, and there we have some incompetent parents. Mary Poppins in the book. Really goofy. And if you have never read the book, Mary Poppins is a real bitch. Afraid so. She is mean. I mean, she's terrifying, actually.
That is quite the Easter egg.
Oh gosh, she does all kinds of, she's a disciplinarian for sure. She is no Julie Andrews, let's put it that way. Jennifer, are you there? Yep, you are. Okay. So talk to us about your post.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this assignment, actually. It was kind of nice to see it threaded together and revisit everything that everybody had said. I sort of fell down the rabbit hole of resistance as I was going through. And it just became, sorry, I had all this on my iPad and it died. So, all right. But essentially, I was really just kind of walking through week by week everything we did, but really just focusing specifically on identity and resistance within them. And noticing those sort of two paths, really like, and I refer to it in my post as like civil or uncivil or passive or aggressive sorts of resistances, things like that. But I was talking about how essentially everything that serves to shape these characters and these adolescents ultimately become their catalyst for resistance. So I was talking about multiple resistances and sort of the irony of environments or their family units being raised in different kinds of resistances, but then the relational aspect of the adolescent to the parent and how that shapes the adolescent's resistance or support of their parents, whatever their parents are resisting or supporting. So sort of you have that teenage rebellion that factors into, or like their status relationship with their parents and how that factors into whether or not they support or resist the resistances that their parents are supporting resisting. So it's kind of, there's a lot going on that plays into all of that. I included as well, I don't remember who said it today, but they were talking about, I think it was Emily, maybe, I don't know, talking about survival and things like that. And so I used Carvana's journey and things like that of how many things factor into identity, of course, in the civil rights movement and things like that, how much resistance was originally as means of survival. But ultimately, it was establishing that in order to be something, you have to not be other things. It was kind of this trend that I was noticing throughout the novels. So, yeah. Sorry. Sorry, my husband's on night, so the rest of these few weeks will be interesting. But anyways, I was, like I said, just kind of going through these different paths of resistance and looking at all the different things, religion, politics, all these things that form identity also sort of become the reason that resistances are formed, especially as they grow or are influenced. So that's kind of what I was examining in my post this week.
Yeah, I couldn't help it. I put this book list together basically with the idea of resistance in mind. And so I think probably every young adult novel I read from here on out, it's going to be, I'm going to see, is this a novel of resistance? Is what's going on? And I just thought of another title for that little abstract that I did. When Food is Resistance would be a good title for that project as well. Megan, are you there still? Yes, you are. People come in and out.
I am here. So I basically, oh, that's me echoing. Sorry, I thought somebody was talking. Excuse me. The thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of flip it, because we always talk about the resistance and everything and what makes up the resistance and what is in fact resisting, who is resisting what and what are they using to resist, because that to me is, I guess it's the pessimist in me. That's to me the thing that connects the novels unabashedly. Every novel we have is going to have some form of consequence in it for the people that are resisting. In Parvana's journey, it was the journey itself taking a physical toll on her. And the 3 novels that I mentioned in my post, the first one was Feed, because in my opinion, Feed is the closest thing we are going to get to a glimpse at our future. Because we are so dependent on technology and screens and internet and everything like that. My being present in this class right now is based on my Wi-Fi connection and based on my computer. It is so inclusive, so all-knowing, all-encompassing that in Feed, Violet resisted for about 2 weeks, and she ended up in all
Dead.
of the word dead. She ended up dead. So resistance is kind of futile. Those are the consequences for her. What are the consequences going to be for us if we continue on this technologically based path that we're on? Anyway, off my soapbox on that.
I think we're going to explode.
We might explode. We just might. Another novel that I looked at by name was The Rock and the River. And I think this, to me, these consequences hit home because I've got such a close connection with my family. He has to watch his brother die. That, I think, nothing will ever top the consequences of that novel, in my opinion, because it's one thing to see a friend die or see a friend go to jail or see somebody you don't know die because of an action that you have been a part of, but to see your own flesh and blood, your big brother, the person you look up to and the person you model yourself after, die as a consequence to the actions that you and he have both been going through and going on this path that you've gone on and these people that you've joined. I think, to me, that is that shock and awe that kind of either cements you in a choice or completely turns you away from it. And in Rock and the River, it does a little bit of both. It turns him from the violence, but it also cements him towards changing the society. And then finally, in Evelyn Serrano, it's another familial connection. We see the strain between Evelyn and Mommy as she grows closer to her abuela, as they both, at the very initial part of the book, they both go towards the revolution, where Mommy's still a little bit of she's taking her time, she's getting there slowly. And we see that put a strain on their relationship. Yes, it was strained before, but when she starts getting in with the young lords and with Abuela, she starts to be more vocal about the strain on their relationship between her and her mother, and her and her father, her stepfather. And then as the mom joins in the resistance, you see those consequences kind of fade away, but she's still, at the end of the book, dependent on her grandmother being there, and then she has to face the consequences of that's not who her grandmother is. She's going to leave eventually. Her mom had to grow with it, and now she's got to deal with that fact that the person that she wants to be in her life the most is probably going to leave. So that's what I did. It's that one solid thread that we know will never fray and never change, because consequences are the price of change.
And what listening to you talk made me think about something about, and I'd call it when resistance means death.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's actually when death happens. So I'm thinking about novels where in the past, where death occurs. Bridge to Terabithia, the young character, the young girl, female protagonist in that novel.
I think that ripped everybody's hearts out.
Yeah, I've never taught it because I can't bear to, because it's so heart-wrenching. Although I've taught some really heart-wrenching novels since then. That she dies. Patterson, I think it is Patterson who wrote that, right? I can't remember. When the female dies, she comes from an agnostic, atheist family, and the author tries to make it clear it's not because of that she dies. It's because of just things happen. She gets swept away, I think, in the river floods
while she's trying to cross it. The rope swing
Yeah.
breaks
To get to Terabithia. Yeah. And so, I mean, we could look at that more closely. It has been typical that earlier in adult novels and in some young adult novels that females who had sex were the ones who died. They die in childbirth, they die from sexually transmitted disease, they die because they, enjoyed their bodies and they had to be punished for that. The guys weren't punished for that, but the females were. And that was very typical in novels of the 19th century, British and American novels, that punishment occurred. So you have Maggie, a girl of the streets, who is fooled by a rake who takes advantage of her, and she ends up losing her place in society and ends up working in a factory, and then that doesn't work out. I don't know. She dies some horrible death of poverty, but it's all because she had sex. And again, the guy does not get punished. It's the woman that does. And I'm thinking now about who dies, and when is it as a result of some kind of resistance? And that, I don't know the answer to that. I'd really have to sit and think. I think there's probably something there. Who dies and when and why in our novels? And when does resistance have something to do with it? And what is it? What role does that death play? So it's a lesson. It's a lesson in history with our historical novels, like Rock in the River, and I guess that would be the one most noticeable. And we know that Violet dies because she resisted the feed.
Part on this journey, that little Layla, the little girl who wasn't afraid of lions. I don't know how much of them. Lions, really, but.
Well, there's a reason for her death. So there hasn't been, nobody really knows, scholars don't really know what to do when it comes to talking about death in children's and adolescent and young adult literature. Although Trite says that death, the recognition of death, is one of the sex and death are some of the two of the defining characteristics of young adult literature: sex and death. How the beginning and the end kind of thing.
The news is making it easier because we see more and more graphic. We hear more. News is so pervasive these days, and so children are aware.
Yeah, and part of the argument on all of that is they didn't used to present it in children or in adolescent literature because it was that concept of protecting the child reader, when that's a very privileged small group of children that have the benefit of being protected, if it's a benefit, and that's been part of the debate. So whether children should become aware of their world and so that they know what they're going to face, or whether to protect them or not. How you doing, Shay? Are you uncomfortable?
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable.
It looks like you're not doing labor things, are you? Don't go into labor right now.
Well, I mean, not active labor things.
Okay.
I've had contractions.
Go right now.
Not right now. Okay.
Okay, you're fine for now. Okay. Keep us posted again.
Resistance is free.
Andrea.
Okay, so the last time we met, Greg mentioned the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and how
Yes.
Will had to leave home for safety. He had to leave home because he got in a fight or whatever. And that premise kind of led me into this theme for what's it called? The revolution of Evelyn's drama.
I'm in the same boat. Where are my words?
Yeah. It kind of, the theme of diaspora or having been forced to leave something or kind of choosing to leave something that you don't necessarily want to leave or that you do to become something new. And Evelyn chooses to leave her home to get a new job. And we've already talked about identity and adulting because your adults aren't becoming an adult. And like being forced to become an adult is like that sense of being forced into migration or being,
It is, yeah.
and all
Good
of,
point.
And all of the children that we've seen are being forced into adulting because they haven't had that opportunity to see it in their parents or in the adults that they are around. So they're being forced into that migration, into adulting. So that was what I was trying to say.
The child to adult diaspora.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was meant. That's what I saw when Greg mentioned that the week before last was how I saw that.
Isn't it wonderful how ideas happen?
Yeah.
I love that. You made me think of something in that process. Some scholars have called it colonizing the child. Training them to be adults in certain ways and relegating childhood. Let's see, childhood.
That's really what Janella was doing. She was trying to train Junior, and in so doing, forced this migration that she just burned up. That's what really broke the camel's back for him.
There it is. So also something to think about is the depiction of these children. It is a romantic depiction of children in many ways, even, and by romantic, I mean as in the romantic writers of the 18th and 19th century, where like Wordsworth especially. So his did I click on, okay, the child is the father of the man. William Wordsworth is my heart leaps up. And so the Romantics really played on that notion of this child who is better, who is at his generally best as a child, at his best as a human being, as a child. Because as we grow older, then we become more, what do we become? Thank you. And corrupt.
Yeah, practical.
Cynical and corrupt. Of course, we know there are such things as corrupt children. And those have been written about too. Flies, Golding's Lord of the Flies. And there's an older novel that the kids are they're on a ship, and I think they do some serious damage to adults and are quite evil. And then there are the novels of Cuckoo's Nest? No. It's that British novel where the kids come out, and it's actually been made into a film, and their eyes are glowing.
Children of the Corn?
No, that's not it. But that's one example of it. So there are such things as corrupt children. The Western world, the United States in particular, wants to take a very romantic view of the child as being having the answers, even if it doesn't know that it has the answers, and just because of brilliance and being unadulterated, I guess, by adulthood. And in some ways we see that with them becoming parents. That, the child can do this. And they can. So without their, except for when they fail, like Violet can't become the parent. She has to die. We get a romantic view. Justice is, he's there. We have a pretty romantic view, or he represents a fairly romantic view of childhood, adolescence. Evelyn does, because of her insights and her will to resist and her desire to be part of the revolution, and that idealism that goes with it. Romanticism and idealism are characteristics that go hand in hand. Buddy, Planet of Junior Brown, is romanticized. So we see it over and over again, but they're romanticized and really bad as they exist in very bad situations. Ta-da! Marcia?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's you.
I don't know, I should put a topic for this, so I'm sorry. I start with Evelyn. From the very beginning of this novel, we see a kind of tension in the relationship Evelyn has with her mother, as she says, "Why did mommy always have to be so baby? I hated that baby voice of hers. She sounds like a slave." So there is no such a good mother-daughter relationship. She's actually frustrated with her life. She's suffering from a kind of identity crisis. First, she's 14 years old, and as you also said, it's coming because almost in all the novels, the characters are teenagers, and they have already transferred from their childhood stage into their teenagers, which is a kind of the most vulnerable stage of life. So we see these characters are struggling with their real identities. They don't like the identities that have defined to them by their parents. So we see Evelyn is embarrassed by her name, even by her appearance. She's overweight, and particularly by her heritage. And throughout the course of the novel, she gains a kind of, she gets to a new understanding of herself. She's no longer embarrassed by her identities or by her name, but instead she takes pride in her heritage. But as I was reading this novel, the theme and the plot of this novel to me was very much similar to the plot and the theme of the Right and the River, because like Evelyn, we see Sam is trying to find her identity, but the formation of his identity is somehow the same as Evelyn to me, because you see Sam is confused. He doesn't know whether to take the part of the side of his father, who is a leader of the peaceful movement, civil rights movement, or to involve in the activities of the Black Panther Party, in which his brother is a member. And you see at the end, okay, by involving in the activities of the Black Panther Party, he gains a real identity for himself. And the same, Evelyn doesn't know whether his mom is correct or his grandma. And just by involving those activities of the young lord, she actually finds, and of course through the influence of her grandmom, she gains his identity. But about the identity crisis, we see this in other characters too, like for instance in Kate, Uzi, am I right?
Ozzy.
Ozzy, yeah. Ozzy also is suffering from such a identity crisis, and though we see his evil side wins his innocent side, and it ends in his death. So this kind of identity and the formation of identity is seen in almost all the novels. But back to the mother, to the parent-children relationship, we can see, as you also and my friends also mentioned, Junior Brown is also suffering from a kind of overprotecting and overbearing mother to the point that he leaves the house. But in the opposite to his mom is, I think, in One Crazy Summer, Cecil is a mom who is not overwhelming, but overprotecting, but she's barely cares for her children, and she leaves her children while they were still infants. So, so generally speaking, considering all these novels and some other novels, the relationship between the mothers and the children, we see that these mothers, literal mothers of these novels, do not play their roles well, but ironically, the figures like Parvano and Delphi plays the role of mother, though figuratively, very well. So it shows that they're such premature children. Though those mothers do not show their roles well, these children can be considered as good mother roles.
What do y'all think about Mami as a mother in Evelyn Serrano?
Well, she practices the matriarch role in her household. Her husband goes and makes the money, and she takes care of everything else.
Mm-hmm. In the kitchen a lot.
Yeah.
She does evolve, though. She
does.
Yeah, she's really against the resisting she's really against the resistance, and then she donates. They find out she doesn't even say so.
Mm-hmm. And she lives at television.
Yes.
Stay.
Oh, yeah,
That was from their bodega.
Yes.
She brings up pastillas.
Yes. Frozen.
What'd you say?
Pastillas.
The pastillas?
Oh, yeah.
The food.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all about feeding. It seems feeding the soul, feeding resistance. I think Mami's transformation might have been a bit unrealistic. So if we think about where both Evelyn, all three women start, Evelyn, the abuela, and Mami, all start in their roles about how they change, because Evelyn changes for sure. She becomes more understanding of her mother, although that one point where she says, you need to quit drinking or using sugar in so much sugar, it makes you fat. I thought, oh, ouch, cringe. And Abuela doesn't change. She's the same as she was as Mami's mother.
So could it also be though, we're getting this story through Evelyn, so
Yes.
could it not just be her point of view?
Yes.
Like her point of view of Mami shifts, that could have been her, but Evelyn was only willing to see one side of her.
Which happens in parent-child relationships very frequently. I mean, in real life, parent.
Like seeing her as an actual human being, not just as Mami who's in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the end when she's so happy, she says, no, you sit down and we'll do this together. And that was a really nice resolution and ending for the novel. At the same time, as I said, I think it was a little bit too easy. At the same time, again, it has to, that sense of completion seems to, she is the antithesis of her abuela. Absolutely. And Evelyn seems to be the synthesis of the two.
You know, and they're co-located, so they seem to all grow together, not mean by together, I mean those who grow at the same time and also together. Whereas Delphine and her sisters went away for their evolution. And I really wonder, I kind of doubt about the evolution. Big Ma was not evolving during that time. And when she went back, it changed. You know, there was going to be some.
Yeah, there is some.
Fireworks.
Did you listen to the second book?
Not yet.
Because I listened to it.
And there's a third one.
I didn't listen to the third one yet.
Is
But I
it
listened
Christian
to
there?
the second one. Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Makes sense.
Big Ma is less than impressed with their newfound
Sure.
revolutionary ideas.
Right.
And think about, okay, so you're using the two words very specifically here, evolution and revolution. And revolution is evolution without the R. No, I don't know. You know what I'm saying, right? And that's what we're talking about in both ways. There's revolution, there's evolution. Evolution isn't always a good thing, although it's frequently depicted as such, as being something of growth, but that's not always the case. But yeah, so Evelyn engages in revolution, but she also evolves as becoming a more understanding, being able to see that other perspective. The same thing happens with. Where are you? There you are.
Sorry, I'm right here.
What were you gonna
I was going to say that in this case, you could also say that her evolution could not have happened without the revolution.
Well, a revolution. Oh, awesome. Well said.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Evolution through revolution. Well, there's
Dr. Stewart,
catchy title. Yes.
one of the articles that I plan on using for my edited collection was talking about that, and I just wanted to point out, and I don't know if this is like obvious to everybody else and I just caught it, but it's like, you know, you're talking about the evolution of these characters, and it's primarily the adolescents that are evolving. And one of the articles that I'm using talks about, you know, it used to be that literature was just to entertain children, but now, you know, we use it to get them to connect to other cultures, to connect to other people, and to teach them things. And so that's why for my project, you know, that's why trauma in adolescent literature is so prevalent, because it's trying to teach kids how to deal with their own trauma. So I just thought it was interesting that y'all were talking about that. And, you know, although the adult characters do evolve, it never seems to be as much as the adolescents in the novels. And I just figured that is probably the case.
Exactly. Well, and that's the function of adolescent novels, is to demonstrate how to grow responsibly, and how to handle, how to rebel and engage in acceptable rebellion. Because if you have somebody like Stick who steps over the line, in what is perceived as over the line here, so his is not a responsible rebellion, or is not an acceptable rebellion, so he gets punished for it, basically. And thinking who else gets punished for, and that's another Trites thing when in Power, or Disturbing the Universe, Power and Repression in young adult literature, that she talks about how characters learn to resist institutions, but they have to do it in a particular way, responsibly. They can't just, shove forth and the bull in the china cabinet thing. They have to do it. And sometimes they have to get knocked down a couple of times before they learn how to subvert those structures and get away with it.
Also, of course, the book is so we can see the evolution of the adolescent. And it goes unsaid how much evolution the adult has already done just to get to the point of the book.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Kirsty, are you there still? Yep, there you are. Revelations in the Revolution.
So I talked about a lot of what everybody else talked about, and I might be kind of sketchy because I feel like I wrote this 10 years ago.
I know, it feels like that, doesn't it?
Yes, it's been a crazy few weeks. So I just talked about like the resistances, and I cannot get out of my head the Greta, I can't remember her last name.
Thunberg.
Yes.
Yeah.
My best friend is an environmentalist, and she told me today on her bucket list when she's done teaching so that she's not in the newspaper is to at least be arrested once for an environmental protest. So I hear about, the environmentalist stuff all the time and climate change. And I sponsor the 7th grade NJHS, and we just started up our recycling program at school. So I can't get that out of my head. And I'm surrounded by it every day. So I kind of went with that and and I can't remember who posted it, but somebody posted about the burden we place on children because adults aren't doing anything about these issues in our world. And so I kind of ran with that. And I pointed out, obviously the resistances that these protagonists involve themselves in. And I just thought it was interesting that, especially in The Rock and the River, I felt like that burden was really placed on Sam because he didn't know which way to go. His dad was taking one direction and his brother was taking another direction, and he looked up to both of them so much. He just kind of felt himself, I guess, caught in the middle. And so that burden kind of just reminded me of everything we talked about, and it was the same thing with Evelyn when she, kind of started looking up to the young lords and listening to what they were saying and, what her abuela was telling her and the things that she was learning from them. So that's kind of where I went with that. Hopefully that makes sense.
That's good. Yeah, I don't know what to make. Again, it's that romanticized idea that children are the transformers of the world. And Greta is a prime example of it. That she's the one that speaks. And she also, people listen to her. And she's been covered on the major news outlets and across the world. And that voice, that kind of voice has a specific impact. It's not lasting. I hate to say this, but no matter how angry Greta gets, the companies that pollute are going to continue to pollute.
They had a moral conscience they would have had
in the first place. Yes.
Well, my husband works at a plastic plant, and they just had another humongous lawsuit because of the pellets that they're putting in to a channel, and I don't know all the logistics of it, but and like my husband said, it's like, we're a multi-million-dollar plastic plant. Like, they're fine.
Good luck.
They sued them, but what did it do? It's, they pay their money and they move on. Yeah, they opened a few extra positions and people are literally out there sweeping pellets for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that these pellets don't get deposited into the fishing channel. But, number one, the damage has already been done. you can't reverse, all the years of them already doing that. And then number two, like they made that money in an hour. They made that money back. So it's really sad to think about it that way. Especially for somebody so young and so passionate about it like she is. But like you said, that one child, unfortunately, is not gonna do much.
No matter how strong her voice, she is not going to change those corporations. She'll change the individuals, but it takes a lot of individuals to make the necessary difference. I will say that I don't know if you remember what Los Angeles used to look like, if you've seen the pictures of how the smog, Los Angeles is the founding word of the founders of smog, basically, of that really cloudy or the gray sky where they have alerts as to whether you can go out or not. It's hugely different than what it used to be. Clear skies in LA sometimes even. Imagine that. And that's because of the governmental regulations that were put in place regarding car pollution, auto pollution, and modifying how automobiles, how they handle CO2 and how it manifests, and putting scrubbers on the smokestacks of plants, of industrial plants. That has helped considerably. And then cleaner rivers and waterways because of the restrictions. But you've seen what's happening to those restrictions, yes? They're going out the window and being lifted by our very own government, the thing that's supposed to help protect us and our land. It's supposed to be good stewards of the land, good stewards of their bank accounts. But
y'all were talking earlier about what lens do we view all this stuff, and I think I can't remember who said it, but I kind of have the mothering lens too, because I don't know if you can hear all this chaos in my house, but I got 4 of them, so that's all I think about. And from one standpoint, I'm like, well, isn't it so? To me, it's kind of inspirational that some kids care enough about these things to vocalize it, because in the classroom they can't even type a address in their web browser. But on the other hand, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil says not to burden children with adult problems. And so I'm kind of like stuck in the middle. As a mom, it would be so inspiring to see my child so passionate about something and wanting to change the world in such a huge way. But then I also want my kid to just be a kid. So.
Yeah, well, that belief comes from an extremely privileged position. So if you think about children in parts of the world where they actually go into battle, where they carry guns, where they fight to maintain a nation, it's a luxury to be able to protect children, a luxury. And certainly not all segments of the United States are able to do that. We see that with what happens with Evelyn's family and Evelyn Serrano, and how her family is so very poor. No matter how hard they work, they will remain poor. And so they can protect Evelyn to some degree, but they can't. And so it does come, it's a luxury to be able to protect our children. I wish that the whole world had that luxury. Might make it would be a different world, because it'd be easier. It'd be easier.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be the need for the Gretas of the world to stand up and say, if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it. Greg.
Yes, ma'am.
It's your turn.
So I thought mostly two things. With the revolution, I thought about the invisibility piece of it, and I thought at the beginning how Evelyn wanted to really be invisible to her culture and wanted to blend in or invisible to the mainstream culture, so that she wasn't identified from her own individual culture at the beginning. So I talked a little bit about that, and also about the resistance piece of that, and I look back at to like the mother in Junior Brown wanting to resist being assimilated into the rest of the black culture. She wanted to be in the main culture, and then also I think it went back to the mother resisting there in the Rock and the River. The mother resisting her her what was it? The mother resisting the challenging the husband, trying to speak out against the decisions that he had, and then Roland resisting, also the violence that he, and the struggles and so on and so forth. I think that I'm trying to think what else I ran into. And obviously Evelyn seeing the resistance of the young lords and trying to organize within the barrio itself. But I think it's more interesting to think about the resistance to assimilating to her own culture or identifying as herself. And as you go back and look at the different things, I think that becomes from, obviously it's hard for me to judge that at being, a white person, but I see this constant theme keep coming up, how the characters of the stories that we read, there's some character inside the story that resists trying to identify with their own culture. And then I forget what was the book that we were reading where I think it was I'm trying to think. Dear Martin, where the mother resisted her son, going out with a white girl. I don't know. I found that the theme of resistance and invisibility there in Evelyn Serrano, the Revolution, and I try to tie it in. You see, I probably wrote way too much compared to what y'all were talking about, but I was trying to tie in all of our other.
Let me, I like that smile at the end. Let me ask you this. It's kind of unfair to ask you to judge from the novels that we've read this semester. So if you have read more adolescent and young adult literature than this, it'll give you a broader perspective. And I've kind of gotten away from reading young adult and adolescent novels that don't deal some way with race. So I see, race as a critical part for all of this. So do you think resistance is going to be generally different when, how do I put this? So the question I want to get to is, when it comes to resistance, and again, this is, it comes to kind of a luxury with a lot of African American literature, Latinx literature representing people of color. It's race. Resistance has to do with race. They don't have the luxury of not dealing with race. But what if we're looking at strictly novels written by white authors that feature white characters, where resistance is going to be part of those novels? Because just being an adolescent, is about resisting something. Do you think that perhaps there's greater luxury for the characters of those novels than there is for novels that feature characters? What do you think?
I don't know, because like if you go to the Hunger Games, like Katniss, though like Suzanne Collins doesn't necessarily construe her as white, you could argue that she's Native American, Italian, like because she's got the olive complexion, the dark hair, but like she is in, and maybe it's because it's dystopian, but she's also, but she's in poverty, like the furthest form of poverty known in that society.
Okay, so we could say that poverty is one of those areas that crosses.
Socioeconomic status.
Okay, so economic status, and I'm trying to think of novels that I've read dealing with that aren't about characters of color. In that realistic novels, rather than dystopia, although dystopia is the reality of the future.
Right.
That's something to think about, for sure.
I kind of incorporated that into a book that I wrote.
Yeah?
When I was 14, I was homeless when I started high school for about almost 2 months.
Wow.
And so I wrote about that and put it into the book.
And I can think of one novel. It's really old. It's called Fox Island, I think. Maybe. And it deals with a young homeless boy and he's white. And his mother, I think. And they live in a car and in the park when they lose the car. And so, yeah, so that is one of those situations that white kids are depicted in. Not very frequently, probably, as I think about all of the books, because I don't go for the cheerful, happy books. I always go for the ones that...
Z for Zachariah.
Z for Zachariah.
Oh my gosh. In race and in poverty both, the children are fighting for something, resisting things that affect their daily lives. Whereas when it's a white, when white characters, theirs is more maybe fighting for or resisting for happiness or resisting evil, but it's not the kind of evil that is someone's going to spit on me today or murder me. It's like the Harry Potter series. It's not their it's their day-to-day life because they're at Hogwarts, but it's not their day-to-day assaults.
But what about the other counter narratives that Delgado and Stefanik, is it her? Like they point out, single moms, and they point out just women in general. Like I think it depends on what category you're looking in.
Yeah.
Because I think we're getting into like trying to measure the resistance and like who's resistance and who's doing it the worst.
Or the best.
Or the best, yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking now of Cynthia Voigt's Homecoming series, and there's one also that she wrote that was, it's called If She Hollers, which is about an abusive father. And abuse is one that crosses those lines for sure.
Yes.
Just something to think about. There's probably something there too. There's a there everywhere. I'm going to probably start class next week with a discussion of the term identity, because it's an ill-defined term, especially as the way we tend to think about it regarding identity formation with children and how they come to be who they are. And the term identity itself, just very briefly, suggests something fixed. And this is in analytical terms and in pre-postmodern terms. But postmodernism comes along and recognizes that there might be a core or an essence, because that's what identity suggests, a core or an essence, but we can never know it. That's according to postmodern terms. I don't know that that's the case. I certainly have a sense of myself that has remained consistent, but I don't know. It could change. I do know that. And I know some things that could probably change it, like if I were put in a dystopia, if I had to exist in a post-apocalyptic place, I would do different things that violate how I would act now. It would no longer, I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't have the luxury of holding on to that sense.
Well, and you wouldn't be constrained by the same rules either.
Yes, everything changes. So identity conveys a sense of fixedness, but in postmodern terms, we think of subject position, subjectivity. Instead of identity, it'd be a sense of self, because that's what we have, more or less. Because we don't know that, that central core, if there is a core. It's about the onion, about peeling the onion down to nothing. And so I'm going to talk about that next week a little bit more, because it's pretty important. We use the term, our whole culture uses it pretty loosely, identity, and assumes that we all mean the same thing. And I think we do to some extent, but it's not a reality. It's an illusion.
So would performance fit under there?
Performance would,
identity,
certainly.
It's performance.
An unconscious performance even would perhaps be a more apt term. But being a subject means that we participate in, or subjectivity suggests that we participate in all kinds of different positions. So that's the one of being able to see perspectives. Identity says it creates this inflexibility that causes people to take planes and, fly them into buildings. Inflexibility. Subjectivity suggests that a person can shift and see other perspectives and stand in different positions. And we all do that. Anytime you're different all the time with different people, different with your kids, the classes that the teenagers that you work with, than you are in this classroom. I'm kind of consistent with, I talk to everybody the same way, to my mom and dad's chagrin, because they don't never know what I'm saying for sure. But that's a choice that I've made also.
Dr. Stewart?
I don't. Yes.
Sorry. Were you saying identity inflexibility or identity flexibility?
Identity inflexibility.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. Think of identity as core, essence, and flexible. Not changing.
It's almost like identity is a destination. We don't ever actually get there, because if we do get there,
we blow up,
going a different direction.
Identity is a point on the line. Subject position is the line.
Is the line, right. That's a good way of putting it.
Cross-curricular, watch out.
Yeah. Yeah, and see, what the problem with child development theorists is they see things as pretty well fixed, or the way they write their books, that, a child at this age is going to do this, at this age is going to do this, and then what happens when that child doesn't? Well, they're abnormal. They're outside of the norm, or they need special attention or something like that. So that's also another problem with that kind of fixedness. It's easy. It's easier in the world. It's easier to categorize children as meeting these major stepping stones along the way, but it's also very dangerous to do so. So we'll talk more about that next week, our last novel, As the Lawns Are Rising. And you got your assignment, and that's it.